Today, we're really digging into your sources about the 1928 U.S. presidential election.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one.
It really is. And these sources, they make it clear this wasn't just, another election. It's happening smack in the middle of the roaring 20s.
Right, this period of, well, huge prosperity, big cultural changes, and new stuff like radio is really starting to take hold.
And what jumped out as we went through the material was this core idea. The election wasn't just Hoover versus Smith.
No, not at all. It felt much bigger, like a real clash between different versions of America, different ideas about where the country was heading.
Absolutely. And the sources suggest the whole thing got kicked off, in a way, by a surprisingly low-key statement from the president at the time, Calvin Coolidge. What did they say about that?
Well, that statement basically blew the doors open for the Republicans. Coolidge just put it out there. I do not choose to run for president in 1928.
Just like that. Wow.
Yep. And suddenly, the Republican nomination. It's anybody's game. Wide open.
Okay, so Coolidge is out. Who do the sources point to as the main contender for the Republicans? What did they tell us about him?
Herbert Hoover. Straight away, the sources identify him. And they almost always use this nickname, the Great Engineer.
The Great Engineer. Interesting.
Yeah, he was Secretary of Commerce. But he already had this huge international profile from, organizing food relief for Europe after World War I.
Right, I remember reading about that. A massive undertaking.
Huge. So he was seen as this symbol of American competence, efficiency, and, of course, the prosperity everyone was feeling.
That nickname really says a lot about what people valued then. Efficiency, progress. So how did that image, according to the sources, shape his campaign message?
Oh, it was perfect for the move of the times, this new era feeling. His message basically was, let's keep this going.
Don't change a thing.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The sources talk about emphasizing prosperity, individualism, keeping government intervention limited. Basically, things are good, don't mess it up.
The implied slogan being something like, keep things rolling.
Exactly. Don't mess with success. That was the underlying vibe.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Playing to that optimism. But the sources show the Democrats nominated someone. Well, almost the polar opposite. Who was that?
That would be Al Smith. He was governor of New York, 4 terms, known as the Happy Warrior.
The Happy Warrior, another great nickname.
Yeah, but his background, his identity, that's really central to the story the sources tell. He was pure New York City, Lower East Side.
A real urbanite, then. Very different from Hoover's image. What else stood out in the sources about him?
Well, 2 massive things. He was Catholic, which is a first for a major party nominee. And he was descended from Irish immigrants. Plus, and this was huge, he was openly against Prohibition. A wet.
Okay, so not just small differences here.
Not at all. These weren't just like biographical footnotes. The sources make it clear they defined him in the public eye and really stirred things up.
And this is where, looking at the sources, it really clicks. Hoover and Smith weren't just political rivals. They almost personified these 2 different Americas colliding.
It's exactly right. You've got Hoover, Iowa roots, Quaker, Protestant, the efficiency guy, supports Prohibition.
Not Smith.
Smith. New York City, son of immigrants, Catholic, against Prohibition, very much wet.
Wow.
So this election became this real flashpoint. The sources show it crystal clear. The tension between rural, Protestant, sort of traditional America and this growing, diverse, urban, maybe more secular America. It was a battleground.
A battle over American identity almost as much as policy. And the biggest policy flashpoint, it seems from the sources, was definitely Prohibition.
Oh, yeah. The 18th Amendment, banning alcohol. It had been law for almost 10 years by 28.
But people weren't exactly thrilled with it everywhere, right?
No, especially not in the cities.
Yeah.
The sources stress how unpopular it was becoming. Enforcement was patchy, speakeasies were everywhere.
And Smith just dives right in.
He does. He openly campaigns as a wed, saying, let's repeal it. And you have to understand, the sources emphasize just how radical that was for a presidential candidate back then.
I bet it must have energized people on both sides.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
His supporters loved it, but his opponents, it galvanized them fiercely. For many people, especially in rural areas, more conservative places, Prohibition was a moral issue, a crusade.
So Smith's position felt like an attack on their values.
A direct attack, yeah, on fundamental American values, as they saw it.
But maybe even thornier than Prohibition, and something the sources spent a lot of time on, was religion, Smith being the first Catholic nominee.
A massive deal. In a country that was, at the time, overwhelmingly Protestant, the sources show this was just a huge hurdle. Maybe, for some, impossible to overcome.
And it wasn't just quiet unease, was it?
No, unfortunately not. There was a lot of open anti-Catholic feeling. Nativism was strong. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan were active and fueled it.
What kind of things were people saying? The sources mention specific fears.
Yeah, specific and, looking back, pretty ugly accusations. The core fear, the sources reveal, was about loyalty. Could a Catholic president truly be loyal to America?
Or would his loyalty be to the Pope in Rome?
Exactly. That was the whisper, sometimes shouted out loud. Claims that Smith would take orders from the Vatican or even try to make America Catholic.
It sounds incredible now, but the sources stress that people believed this.
They really did. We have to remember, however irrational it seems to us today, these sources underline that for many Americans in 1928, this fear felt very real, very potent.
Okay, so you have these intense cultural issues swirling. Then there's the campaign itself, and new technology like radio starts playing a part.
A big part. Both candidates used it, but the sources say they had different styles. Hoover gave these very calm, measured speeches, all about prosperity, stability.
Steady hand on the tiller kind of thing.
Right. Smith, though, was apparently much more dynamic, more conversational, really connected with listeners that way. But, yeah, his New York accent was really distinct. And combined with his whole background, the sources suggest it sometimes, probably unintentionally, reinforced the stereotypes his opponents were already pushing.
And those attacks could get nasty based on the source material.
Vicious. There was propaganda, cartoons depicting Smith as this, like, cigar-chomping Tammany Hall type, maybe with the Pope pulling strings in the background.
Yeah.
Really potent imagery.
Wow. The sources mention a specific slogan that captured a lot of this?
Yes, the infamous Rum, Romanism, and Ruin. Now, Hoover's official campaign probably didn't endorse it directly.
It stuck.
Oh, it stuck because it perfectly bundled up all those anxieties. Smith's wet stance on alcohol, rum, his Catholicism, Romanism, and this general fear that he represented some kind of threat, ruin to the way things were.
Okay, so with all the culture clash, prohibition, religion, the campaign tactics, what happened? What were the results?
Well, the results were pretty overwhelming, according to the sources. A landslide for Hoover.
A landslide? How big?
Huge. He won 40 states, got over 58% of the popular vote. Just a sweeping victory.
So a really decisive loss for Smith then. Where did he actually win?
Only 8 states. He carried Massachusetts and Rhode Island, which had large Catholic populations, so that
Like anywhere else.
Interestingly, yes, he won several states in the Deep South, which seems counterintuitive for a Northern Catholic anti-Prohibition Democrat back then.
That is surprising. Do the sources explain that?
Yeah, they touch on it. They note that regional factors, especially around race and the legacy of the Civil War, still heavily influence Southern voting patterns. The Democratic Party loyalty was just incredibly strong there, even for a candidate like Smith. It's complex.
Okay, so looking back through the sources on this whole election, what are the big takeaways? What lessons jump out?
Well, first, it's a stark reminder of the power of prosperity, or at least the feeling of prosperity. When times seem good, people are hesitant to change course.
Hoover definitely benefited from that roaring 20s vibe.
Absolutely. Voters often stick with the party they associate with good times.
And the second big lesson.
It just threw these deep divisions in America into sharp relief, didn't it? The cultural divides, the religious tensions. 1928 didn't create them, but it certainly exposed them.
And those fault lines, as the sources suggest, didn't just disappear after the election.
No way. They continued to shape politics for decades. But, it's also important to note Smith's legacy, even in defeat.
How so?
Well, the sources imply his run was still a turning point. Just by being the first Catholic nominee from a major party, he broke a significant barrier. It kind of paved the way, maybe made it slightly easier for future Catholic candidates like JFK decades later.
That's a really important point. But there's a twist ending to this 1928 story, isn't there? Something the sources highlight as deeply ironic.
Oh, the biggest twist of all. Hoover wins this massive victory, elected on this platform of continued prosperity, celebrating the new era.
Everyone's feeling confident, the economy's booming, and then,
almost exactly 1 year later, the stock market crashes, October 1929.
And the country plunges into the Great Depression.
Exactly. The very foundation of Hoover's victory, that prosperity he promised to continue, just evaporated.
The ultimate irony. The man elected for good times suddenly faces the worst economic crisis in American history.
It completely changed everything. The political landscape that 1928 seemed to cement was just obliterated by the Depression.
So looking back through all the source material, the 1928 election really stands out. It's this powerful snapshot of America at a crossroads.
Yeah, wrestling with culture, religion, economics, identity, all these complex forces. And it's a stark reminder of how quickly things can change, how drastically the ground can shift under your feet.
Understanding that clash, those anxieties from 1928, it really helps you see the roots of some divisions and shifts that, well, still echo in American politics today.
Which maybe leaves you with a final thought to chew on as we wrap up this deep dive. How do those cultural and economic anxieties so raw and visible back in 1928 keep showing up? Maybe in different clothes, different forms, but are they still resonating in our political conversations right now?